Hello everyone, welcome back to How It's Made. Today we're looking at the tower defense game. If you don't remember how it works, let me do a little run through for you. So let me go ahead and hit play here. So in this game, you control a builder. That's your person who kind of creates all your towers to defend your base. So this is your character right here. You can also zoom in on them with the tab button. And then this is your base all the way at the end. And then every time you kind of walk over a tile, it'll kind of highlight the tile just so you know exactly where you're going to be placing a tower. So let's go ahead and place some towers and beat this first wave, and then we'll start jumping into some of the code. So as you can see, standing over a tile and just clicking on the button will build that tower. And then let's go ahead and hit start wave. And you can see the arrows track the enemies, the towers track the enemies, and when the enemies die, they drop some money as well. Another cool feature is you can click on an enemy and see their face as well. And then the part of this game is you need to then collect the money and bring it back to your base to then get some more gold. So that's pretty much the basics of the game. So let's kind of jump into what we really need to make this work. So hopefully this video won't be super long like the other ones. I'm going to try and keep it under 30 minutes this time because there's really only 4 specific scripts you need to use to kind of make most of this work. Those scripts are going to be my player script, my tower aim script, the projectiles, and the tiles. So let's go ahead and kind of start with the tiles. I'll kind of also zoom in on the tiles over here. Let's kind of like hide all of the HUD. So any of these are the tiles, so you can kind of see that they are just a sprite render with a box collider that's a trigger, and then they have their tile script. So let's go ahead and see what that script really does. So this tile script, it has 3 components to it. It needs a bool to know if I have a tower on it or not. It needs to also have access to its sprite, so that's how we kind of change the color of the grass. And then we also need to know what tower is on that tile. So when we start, we just do the regular kind of thing here. We just get our component for our sprite. That's why it's not public, so it just makes it easier that way. In our update, we kind of just see if we are occupied, then we switch our color to just always stay the regular color so it doesn't go into that greener color. And then we kind of have here on our trigger enter, if it is our player and the tile is not occupied, that's where we turn green. Whereas once we leave it as the player, then we turn it back to white. So that's pretty much all what the tile does. The more important stuff here is kind of just knowing whether it's occupied or not. Just so you can't build multiple towers on the same tile. So now that we kind of know that, let's jump into our player script because that's where a lot of the building happens. So in our player script here, we have a bunch of variables that we use. So let's kind of go through them. So we definitely need to know about our move speed, especially in this game. I let you kind of increase your move speed over time. You're also going to want a list of all of your tiles. And we also want to know like our current tile as well from that list. You may or may not need the sprite renderer because I think I have a sprite renderer for both the head and the body. So this is kind of old, but if you need to kind of change that, do it. We have an array of our towers that we want to use. I'm pretty sure this is the tower prefabs. We also know about our base, which that may or may not be useful to your build. We also have a particle system, I think, for just running around. Our animator, of course, and then we have our resources here. So how much gold our character has, how much gold our character can carry, whether our sprite has gold or not, and this is our money slider kind of thing. Now you can see here, this is like all the customization stuff. So what head and body we're using. If you don't remember, when you go in the main menu, you can completely customize what your character looks like. So it's pretty much all of that stuff right here. And then in our start, so we kind of save that to our game manager. So our game manager knows what kind of head and body we have chosen. And then we just kind of assign that to our sprites. We also want to get our animator component because it does animate. And then we want to also make sure our max value of our slider is going to be our max gold capacity. And then we're going to just hide it from our game because we only want to show it when we pick up gold. And then lastly, we're just going to kind of assign our sprite as well to be our sprite renderer. In our update here, we've got a couple of things. Let's first kind of go through what these things are, and then we'll kind of go into the separate functions. So in our update, our gold value is always going to be whatever our gold carried is. So whenever you kind of run through a piece of gold, it's going to increase this number here, which then in turn is also going to update your slider value. So if we have more than no gold, then we switch our body sprite to be the full sprite so that you have gold on your backpack. And then we actually enable the gold slider as well. Otherwise, your body is just a regular body and we hide the gold slider. So now let's get into the movement of our player. Let's kind of start from the top here. So I use the get axis because it's a very easy way to know whether you're moving up, down, left, or right. So getting axis for either horizontal or vertical, these read inputs for the WASD. They also read inputs for arrow keys. If you're using a gamepad, all of it works for these. So they're pretty handy things. Then I pretty much just have bounds here. So if I'm trying to go too far off the map, then I kind of just reset my position. And same with going, this I believe is right, left, up, and down. So I'm pretty much just making sure my player can't leave the camera view. Otherwise that would be bad and you can lose track of your character. And then this line here is actually the movement. So I'm changing the position to be my new vector 3, which is whatever my position is, plus whatever my input is, times my move speed, times time, and then I do that for Y as well over here. And to kind of make it look good, because I have multiple sprites all on this one body, I have to actually change the scale in order to flip the character. So if I am going to the right, then my scale is normal. If I'm going to the left, then I just need to invert my X size so that I'm facing the other way. As you can see, there used to be sprite flips, but that did not work. So next we're going into here. So if we are not moving at all, or I mean here, if we are moving at all, then we are playing the little dust trail behind our character. And we are also making sure our animation is set to walking. Otherwise, if we have no inputs at all, they're both 0, then we can just stop that little dust trail and we can stop the walking animation. This is where kind of the bread and butter comes from actually placing your towers. So let's kind of go through it. So pretty much the way that I'm doing it is I have that array of tower prefabs. So I just want to know which tower I'm using when I'm placing this. So I'll show you kind of in the engine too what it all looks like. Then I'm pretty much seeing, okay, do I have enough gold that covers my tower's cost? If I do, then we're going to look at whatever my current tile count is. And then we want to just make sure that the current tile that I'm in, which is the first tile, is if it isn't occupied, so occupied is false, then I'm able to do all of this stuff. So what this place tower is it is those buttons when you press like the arrow tower, stuff like that. This is what it all does. So once I've kind of figured out that, okay, the tile I'm on is not occupied and I've pressed to buy my tower, then we're going to just subtract the gold from my home gold. That's just where the gold is placed. And then we're going to create a new game object called new tower because there's going to be a few things we need to do for it. So the first thing is if our tower has the tower aim component, then we're going to just make sure the build time is whatever we have. There is an extra semicolon. You don't need to, but that's all right. Then we also want to make sure that its current tile is now going to be that tile that we built it on. We're also going to then turn that tile to be occupied. And then we're also going to assign this tower to that tile's tower, so that now that tile knows all about this tower that we've just placed. And then lastly, we are also going to just kind of set a radius for the tower. So the tower has like a different radius for how big its range is. So this kind of line can be kind of ignored if you don't need it. But if you want, you can also make this like a certain number too. Then we come into our cell tower. So we're pretty much just checking here if we have a current tile that we've walked into and it is occupied and we hit the button to sell, then I am going to just give the home gold whatever amount of cost it is divided by 2. Because our home gold is an integer number, it would always come back as like a 0 or something not correct. So that's why I've kind of casted it to an int as well, just so whatever value it gives, it just rounds to the nearest whole number. And then we can also destroy that tower, and then that tile we can then say is not occupied anymore. And then the other thing that was in our update was the update player, which is pretty much just updating all of their kind of necessary stats. So our move speed is always going to be whatever we make our player speed. Our gold capacity is always going to be whatever our player capacity is. And our max value on our gold slider is also going to be that gold capacity. So not too much kind of going on here. Again, this could be something you totally ignore if you're not using a builder to build your towers. And then right here on the on trigger, again, this is kind of just how we figure out some things. So if we are running into a tile, then we're going to add that tile to our current tile list that we have. If our collision is gold, then we're going to add it to our gold. But we only do that if we have enough capacity on our character. Then we add it to our gold carried, and so on and so forth. And then only when we exit a trigger collider, that's when we just remove that current tile. So you can have multiple current tiles that you're in, but whatever kind of is the first one is the tile that like you are going to place your stuff. So let's kind of go back into Unity and kind of see where all this stuff works and how it looks. So let's kind of close up this grid, click on my player. So as you can see the player here, and let's kind of like move the player so you can see them. And let's hide this gizmo. So as you can see here, this is the player. So the player is just a transform. So this is like a base object for the player. I also use a rigid body, the player script here with all that stuff. You can see all the customizable heads that I have and bodies and all that stuff. And then the animator. So it's really just the main script, rigid body and some sort of collider, and the animator. However, the player has a couple of other things on them. So they also have the player's UI, which is just the slider bar here. That's the gold slider. Nothing really too crazy there. We also have the player's camera is just on the player. The dust trail is just a particle effect that I created for them. Nothing really too crazy there either, just a very small box particle system. And then you can see that I have the body here and then the head here. So those are just the two body parts as well. You might be wondering, where was that like place tower stuff and all that stuff going on? So let me kind of show you that. So these are all the different towers we have. I have them kind of based in order. And then if we open up our HUD here again, you can kind of see when I click on this tower here, if it'll let me, bottom panel arrow tower. In here, in its on click, I use the player's place tower, and then it's going to be the 0 one. So if you remember, it's then going to go, okay, what tower do I want? I want that 0 tower. That's going to be the one that I'm going to be creating. And then all of these towers are just prefabs. So it's going to figure out, okay, I want to use that tower's prefab, get its money, get its stuff, all that, and then place it. So that's pretty much where that goes. And then this was the, I don't know why I can't click on it. Destroy tower button right here, which just does the cell tower. And then all of these do all the same things. So you can kind of see they all do the place tower. They literally all use the same function, but I just changed this number so I know which tower I want to build. So hopefully that makes some sense. What's next here? We're going to look at the tower aim, so how these towers actually shoot. So let's go through the script, and then again I'll show you the towers. So we need a projectile prefab, so every tower obviously shoots something. We need to know what enemies are near this tower. And then for myself, I have a reload timer and then another timer as well, just to help with the reload. I have a bool if I'm building or not, because I do make these things, they don't instantly spawn, they have like a build time and then they start working. So I have a building bool here for that, and a build effect, which is a particle system, and then also these build bar and time, stuff like that. And then I do have one extra bool just to know if this tower is a lightning tower or not, because they shoot kind of differently, and then what sound it makes when it shoots. So when we start, we want to make sure that we are building this tower. So we set the bool on building to true, and we just make our max build value of the build bar, whatever our build time is, which I think is like 2 seconds or something. And the value is 0. And in our update here, we also want to always continuously update whatever our radius is. It's going to be our tower range, because I let you actually change how much range every tower has. And so if the building is true, so we are building our tower, then we're just going to increase this value by time until it hits our build time, to which then we stop everything and the tower is ready for fighting. So now that we're out of our building phase, we can now see if we have no enemies in our range. So the enemies in range, that count is 0 or less than 0, which shouldn't be ever. Then we just want to reset our transform rotation back to being nothing. So I use a little lerp function for that. And then we just return out of this and we don't have to update anymore. Otherwise, if we do have some enemies in our range, then we are going to run a for loop. So this one is just if any enemies have died while they have been in our radius, we're just going to remove them so our tower doesn't get confused that they still have like an enemy or a null or some sort of error happening. So we're just going to kind of get rid of them from our array here, or our list, I mean. And then we have some extra stuff if we are lightning, and then we want to shoot every enemy in our range here. So what we do is we do a nice for loop through all of our enemies, play our sound effect, and then create a new projectile that will shoot every enemy. So that's kind of how that one works. And then we just reset its timer so that it can go back for that. And then this is the normal shooting, so it makes a little bit more sense. So if we aren't a lightning tower, we're just a regular tower, then what we're going to be doing is, again, if our timer has hit our reload time, then play your sound effect, spawn your projectile, and make that enemy that you're shooting towards the new target for the projectile. So we'll get into that script after this one. And then just, again, reset the timer. And then after all of that stuff, we just constantly keep updating the timer by time.delta time. And then right here, this is all of the looking, so how the tower actually follows our targets. So we create a vector 3 called look direction, and that's going to be whatever enemy in range our first enemy is minus our transform position. And then we're going to find the angle of that. So we use an atan2, which uses our look direction y and our look direction x. Then we're going to multiply that by radians 2 degrees. We're also going to minus it by minus 90. That's just because if you don't do that, then it's going to be shooting from the right side. So I want it to shoot from the top of my thing so that when I rotate them, it's always going to come from the right spot when it's shooting. So that's why it has to be -90 for my use case. If you have towers that are, aiming towards the right, then you don't need this. If you have them aiming in a different direction, then you'll have to figure that one out. And then lastly, we just set its rotation to be that angle. So because we're in a 2D space, we don't care about the X or the Y rotation. That'll make it look bad. We just care about the Z rotation here. And then how do we figure out what enemies are in our radius? Well, that's easy. We have the big radius collider, and that is a trigger. So what we do is we just figure out if the collision is the enemy, then we're going to add it to our enemies in range. And when that enemy leaves our radius, then we just remove it from the list. So pretty simple there. Let's take a look at one of our towers just so you can kind of see it. So I'll double click on the arrow tower here, and you can see this is its radius for attacking. So it's got a pretty decent radius, at least like 2 squares. So, they're not terrible. They have a tower script too, which I can kind of quickly show that. It's honestly doesn't do much. It's just its cost and what tile it's on. And then we also have our tower aim script here, which we just went through. So you need to know what projectile you have in there, how fast it's going to reload. And then you just want a build effect, which you can see is this gray smoke. The build bar slider, which is this green bar here. And then some sort of sound effect for that. And then if it is my lightning tower, then I would have checked this off, but it's not. And that's kind of it for the towers. There is also a transform. Nope, not a transform. This is just the sound effect. You can actually, I think what I do is I just spawn them right from the center of each tower. So it still kind of looks like it's shooting, but you could definitely add a transform of like your shoot point and then use that to kind of spawn the projectiles. Let's get into the last one, the projectiles. And then you've kind of have a good basics of what you're going to be doing for this kind of game. So I have a projectile type because I have multiple different types of projectiles. They can either be normal, like the arrow tower, they just go and they hit and then the thing goes away. They can be AoE, so they can hit multiple targets in a row. They can pierce, so they go right through enemies, or they can slow. So I think I only have when the water tower slows the enemies. So pretty much what you need is you definitely need a target. You definitely kind of want to know how fast these bullets are going to be coming out. If you want to know how much damage they do, that's good too. And then you also need to know the type. And then lastly, mostly for the AoE, you're going to need to know some sort of layer because we're going to be doing some physics collider 2D stuff. So in our start, pretty much all we need to know is if our projectile is a piercing projectile, then we're going to destroy it, but we're going to destroy it in 2 seconds. So we're going to let it spawn and then do its thing and then die in 2 seconds, regardless of if it's hit anything or not. So honestly, if you didn't have a piercing projectile, you could just ignore this. Then here in our update, what we kind of want to do is if we don't have a target anymore, we are going to reset the transform of our target to ourself, the projectile, and then we're just going to destroy it. So that pretty much is just going to help with any kind of errors you may get. I used to always get errors and I kind of ignored them, and then I kind of figured out that it was because the target would die, but the projectile was still going towards the target. So what I did here is just if the target ever becomes null, so the enemy died before the projectile hit it, then I'm just going to kind of reset the target to be something so that it's not null anymore. And then I'm just going to destroy the projectile. And that got rid of all my errors. The next thing here is if our projectile is piercing, then of course all we're going to do is just make it go forward. So in 2D, vector 3 up is more or less your forward, unless you're facing a different direction. But as you can see, all of my sprites, they face up. So up is my forward. And then I just multiply it by speed and time. Otherwise, so now it's just like any other bullet other than piercing. We're going to be moving towards our target. So we do this vector 3 move towards, which uses our position, and then we go to the target position. and we multiply its speed by time as well. And then we do the exact same thing we do for aiming our tower. We create a look direction, and then we just set the rotation that way. So that way the projectile is always going and moving and looking towards the enemy. So it looks a little bit better. And then here is where pretty much all of the damage happens. So when our thing collides with an enemy, there's a few different things that we do. So if our type is normal, then we just do a normal, subtract some health from the enemy based on whatever our tower damage is. So all of the towers do 1 damage, but they can be increased. So that's why it's just tower damage. And then we just destroy that game object, which is the projectile. If our projectile is AoE, then we're going to need to know how many enemies we're hitting. So we create a Collider 2D array of our enemies in Blast. And then we do this physics 2D overlap circle all, which is the position of our projectile. I give it kind of like a 2 radius, and then we need to know what layer it is. So I just create an enemy layer for that. And then we do a quick little for loop to just every enemy that was in the blast radius of that is just going to lose health based on tower damage. And then we destroy the projectile once it's done dealing its damage. The next one is slow. So if we hit an enemy and we slow it, then what we do is we subtract its health a little bit, again by the tower damage. We then set its move speed, and we also have a bool on our enemies to know when they're slowed. And I'm pretty sure we just switch that slowed and restore its move speed after like a second or two. So nothing too crazy there. And then we also want to then just destroy that projectile. If we have a piercing projectile, then we just subtract health. And if you remember from earlier, it's going to kill itself later, say in 2 seconds. So we don't need a destroy here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the projectiles here. They are prefabs. So you can kind of see here, all they really need is some sort of collider. Rigid body is helpful. And then the projectile script. And you can see I created a layer called enemy. So all of the different enemies here, they all have that layer. So the AoE is going to work when it hits any of them. Something we can kind of quickly go over is just the enemy script here. I won't go through everything, but just to kind of know about how to get your enemy to actually move through your maze. So pretty much for that, you're going to need these checkpoints here. And in our update, so you're going to need a checkpoint and like an integer of, your current checkpoint. And pretty much you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to do the move towards and then that checkpoint's position. And then what I do is I kind of look at some distance. So I look at the distance between the enemy's position and the current checkpoint it's going to. If that distance is like really low or really close, something like that, then I just increase what checkpoint it's going to. So then this number is going to go up, and then it's going to affect this line up here. And then if we've gone too far, we've pretty much gotten to the base, and then we just destroy it anyways. And then there's a bunch of other stuff in here, which I'll kind of slowly go through it just by the mouse wheel, but I'm not going to kind of explain it. It's just some kind of stuff that, you can look at on your own time. And then I'll kind of just show you how that enemy stuff works. So let's go back to the scene here. Let's hide the HUD and scroll in here. And I should have enemy spawner has all these checkpoints. So I can kind of look at all of these. They should be kind of visible. Oh, it's because the gizmos are off. So you can kind of see these are all the different checkpoints coming from over here to start and then going all the way to the end base. So they go, to this one and then to that one and so on and so forth. So it's very easy to kind of get them to move in a straight line, especially like this. So if you're trying to recreate that, that's how I would go about it. But this video is starting to get pretty long, so let's kind of wrap it up there. So those are the main scripts to kind of get you started on making your own tower defense. There are a bunch of other like videos to also look at in case you're not going to place it by using a builder, but you want to use like, you know, mouse clicks and stuff like that. Let me know in the comments if this helped you at all, or if there's more you would want to see from this game. I am considering making more tutorial videos, maybe like, you know, a code together kind of video. So drop a like on this video or comment if that's something you want to see in the future. Again, I'm trying to hit 50 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you're enjoying these videos, consider subscribing. I'll be hosting my poll later today for next week's game, so make sure you follow my Instagram. There will be a link in the description. I'm trying to make maybe some sort of arcade game or high score game for next week, so I'll have a couple of different options for that. I'll also put a link to this game in the description so you can just play it as well. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in Monday's video.